Okay, thank you, Lee. Today I'll be talking about embracing flexible working, and it's a topic pretty close to my heart. As a lot of you know, in 2005 I actually worked from the UK office for 12D, and I was over there for 6 years. And yeah, we really struggled managing separate offices, and back then the internet wasn't quite as good as it is now. So particularly when we're talking large 12D model projects in CAD, it was really hard to move data backwards and forwards around the world. And I think in the end we ended up all just having a really large capacity hard drive, and we all just walked around and manually copied the data sets. When I saw Graham over in the Middle East, we'd just sit there and copy all the files manually. That was probably one of the main ways that we managed our data, which isn't great, but it was the best solution we had at the time. Now, so now I'm pretty passionate about obviously 12D synergy and helping our customers using 12D synergy to embrace the flexible work environment in their offices. So most of us know that 12D synergy has a broad range of capabilities. It manages 12D model, CAD, email, data sync tool for 12D field, etc. However, there are many fundamental features of 12D synergy, such as local caching, that really helps with flexible working. So when I was preparing this talk, I noticed that many of these features, they're not just useful for when you're out of the office, they're actually a bedrock of the product when you're actually in the office. So for the first part, I'll just talk about some of the generic features when you're in the office, and then we'll talk about the flexible side and build on those concepts. Okay. Now, one of the biggest challenges in our industry, and it's quite unique, is just the size of the data sets. Now, I think everyone in this room knows how big the data sets get, and as Peter sort of alluded to before, that once you start talking LiDAR and mobile scanning, they're enormous. One thing you're also probably aware of is that IT departments and upper management generally have little understanding of how big these data sets get. When we talk to a lot of IT departments, they're literally shocked when we talk about projects could be into the gigabytes. And then we talk about let alone scanning, which could be easily into the 100 gigs. So a lot of the systems that you've got are built by people that don't really have a great understanding of the data sets that you're dealing with. There's also the challenge of the folder of files that makes up the 12D model project. And we essentially do that because we are optimized for large data sets. So a big folder of files, lots of small files, is faster to run rather than having a massive, say a DWG file, that every time you touch it, it has to load the entire thing into RAM. So that's why we've got the folder of files. It also allows us to transfer less data because we're just sending small files rather than the big one. It also reduces the risk of corruption, because if one of those small files corrupts, it doesn't screw your entire project and you can potentially rebuild it. So that was sort of the ethos that Lee and Alan started with in the early 90s when they started 12D. So your typical design office at the moment, you've probably got a shared network drive, and everyone accesses their projects from that central location. Now that's an absolute must, because your IT departments, they back up that central location. So if something does go wrong, you can always go back to your backups. Now, every time, though, that you open a 12D model or a CAD project, you're pulling that entire project down onto your local drive. So that could be 300 megs for a DWG, or many gigabytes for that 12D model project. And then when you're sitting there, it's wasting time as you're actually waiting for that project to load. Also, at the same time, you're actually congesting the network. If everyone in your office is hammering the network with these massive data sets, everyone's suffering. And looking around the industry, it certainly seems to be a very common problem, and it's certainly, pretty much everyone is facing. And it's probably government departments that are struggling just as much, if not worse, than the private sector. So what's the solution? So you've got a few options. The first one, just deal with it, suck it up, work more hours. That seems to be the approach a lot of the times, unfortunately. You can upgrade your network speeds. Now, realistically, most of your offices have got the fastest networks they can afford, and once you start getting really fat pipes, it costs a lot of money. And particularly when you've got multiple offices as well, the cost just becomes prohibitive. And unfortunately, there's no real saving grace like an NBN around the corner, so this doesn't seem to be changing in the near future. You can quit in frustration and hope the next company has a better solution. Or you can, a lot of people try and integrate generic document management systems. So a big one, okay, we'll implement SharePoint. And these systems are great for email, Word and Excel, and yeah, they're really great at that. However, when it comes to CAD, 12D model, Revit, MX, they have no idea about our geospatial applications. So the IT departments think that all the data will live in something like SharePoint, and then within weeks, everything's pulled out because they're totally not workable. The next option is, hey, I'll just work off my local drive. Because when I copy everything to C drive, everything runs really, really quickly. And what could go wrong? So first of all, working off your C drive, there's no backups. So if your data gets corrupted, or say you lose your computer or it's stolen, everything's gone. You could lose everything. So it's a real ticking time bomb. You're also then creating duplicate data sets. So what happens when you're working off the local drive and someone in the office is editing the project that you copied from? You've then got two data sets, and you could potentially be issuing an outdated data set. So there's huge potential issues with duplicate files. All the workflows in your business is broken because you're taking these data sets locally, and when they're on your C drive, it's very hard to share with other people when it's on your local machine. So now you have another option. You can buy a DMS from an Australian software developer built on Sydney's northern beaches, and then it integrates with 12D model. So synergy is really the best of both worlds. Essentially, everything is stored in the server, and when you check it out, it copies everything locally, so you're actually working off your local drive. But the IT is happy because everything's still backed up at the server level. So that's really the nuts and bolts of why it really works really well. Now, these servers could live in the cloud, they could be in-house. And because you're running off your local drive, CAD and 12D model is going to be really responsive. A lot of the time we sit there, every time you try and save a file or auto-save, it sits there waiting because it's copying all that data across the network. So everything when it's running off C drive, your applications will be running super quick, and your network's less congested because you're not sending that data across. Now we keep talking about the intelligent data transfer. Now, what is that? So your 12D model project's 900 megabytes. You check it out. When you check it back in, you're only sending the files that change. The next day you come in the office, you check it out again. Someone else has only made about 90 megabytes, 50 megabytes of changes, so you only download that in the future. So the amount that you're actually sending across the wire is greatly reduced. And from the numbers we've seen from our customers, around 91% data reduction with 12D model projects. So that's a huge saving, and I know your IT people would be very happy to have that reduction. And that's also without thinking about file replication servers or anything like that. That's just a server-client relationship there. So the data transfer is one aspect. The other aspect is the time savings, waiting for those projects to download. And I guess from our side, we're quite shocked of how long it was actually taking a lot of our customers to download those 12D model projects. So in one case study we had, it was taking about 13 minutes every time they were checking out opening a file off the Windows network drive. Then when they implemented 12D Synergy, for the first initial access, they got it down to 5 minutes, and that's because we can just download the files much more intelligently. And then every subsequent change, you're looking at a 1-minute transfer. So it's a huge reduction considering you're probably checking in and checking out projects multiple times in a day. So when you calculate that out, I think for a 12-week project, looking at about 6 people working on it, checking it out a couple of times a day, at 4 hours a week, you're looking at $43,000 in cost savings, literally in just waiting for that project to open. Okay, so it's pretty significant just in that for that one aspect, that one feature. So I could talk about flexible working. So when I talk about flexible working, some people it's about changing your core hours so you don't have to be there from 9 to 5. But I'm also including being able to work from another office, being able to work on the road, and being able to work from home. So that's really what I'm talking about during this talk. Now, the sad reality for our civil designers is that most of you are chained to your desk. Okay, if you want to, if That doesn't matter if it's the weekend, there's an issue with the project, you're commuting into your office to access your projects. That's the reality. Now, most companies have solutions. Their IT departments, oh, you want access from home? Cool, we'll give you a VPN. And pretty much most people that try that, it's just too slow. Opening up, for email and Word, it works fine. So IT managers are happy. Your bosses are probably happy because they're just accessing Word and Excel. But for 12D Model and CAD, it's really not a workable solution. So what really happens when people are only given the option of a VPN? They work locally. And what could go wrong? And that's the reality. If you've got a deadline to hit, and you need to work from home, people are then working locally and then opening your business up to all these risks. And most people know that they shouldn't, but what choice do they have? So with Synergy, it's not just for working in the office. You can connect through your firewall and you can work from home. So whether it's 12D Model or CAD, you can pretty much access all your files just like you'd be in the office. I think Stuart gave a pretty good overview of how flexible working changed his project. So I have a testimonial here from Ben Brown. He was working on projects in Sydney and then moved back to the Brisbane office. And projects were taking around half an hour to 40 minutes to download. Now, once they implemented Synergy, they got it down to about 1 or 2 minutes. So what turned from going for a lunch break just to wait for your projects to open was pretty much just a short coffee break. And this seems to be very familiar. I certainly don't want to be picking on WSP with this. This is familiar across most organisations, particularly the larger organisations with the more congested networks. So with 12D Synergy, you're unchained from your desk. All of a sudden, you can access data from anywhere in the world at any time. Just before someone found out they had to do a talk later on today, they just jumped onto Synergy and they could access all the data that they needed for that talk. So why is flexible working important? I'm sure there's some directors and managers in the audience that's thinking, so what? What's the business benefits of flexible working? Well, first of all, you can tap into a global talent pool for projects, especially at the current time, basically Australia's booming, especially in Sydney and Melbourne. It's very hard to find good people. So if you're able to access work from anywhere, workers from anywhere, all of a sudden it makes that recruitment process much easier. Also specialised skills. There are many, many disciplines now that have become more and more specialised, and you can't afford to have someone in every office with those skills. Think, say, 2D modelling. So you've only got a few of these people scattered around the world. And so for certain projects, you need these skills. With something like 12D Synergy, you can bring them in as needed. All they need is a Synergy connection. They've got full access to the data and they can be productive. No longer do you have to simply recruit from where your office is located. So if good staff pop up anywhere in the country or the world, you can hire them. And also now we've seen a lot of sharing work between quiet and busy places. So at the moment, everyone's trying to get the work done in Sydney and Melbourne. They can't keep up with everything. So solar offices, say in Perth or in regional centres, they're able to leverage those users and actually get the work done in Sydney. And particularly with the order book's so full in the next 3 to 5 years, we expect that to happen a lot more. Reducing travel costs. If you have to be physically in the office, you have to fly people in to get the work done, or you need to relocate them, and this costs a fortune. So if they can just do it from their home office, that's a really big measurable benefit. You can also keep staff in downturns. I think as soon as the economy turns, most large companies particularly seem to just cull large amounts of their workforce. Now that's good for us. We normally hire these guys and they become our best staff. But at the same time, it's good if you can keep one office going with projects from another location around the world. It diversifies your business and makes you more robust and allows you to keep talented staff for the future. It also allows you to improve the productivity and efficiency of your remote staff. Now, we've shown this slide probably a few times, talking about all the major consultants have essentially started using Synergy, the surveyors and contractors and even TMR. But it's certainly not a tool just for the big boys. I guess they get a bit more showcased here in the technical forum because they're the boys on the major projects. But the reality is we've got the majority of our customers are actually small. So it's the small companies like J. Wyndham Prince, it's LD Eng, it's Burn Consulting. These are the guys that are using Synergy. And they're also using the file replication servers once they get multiple offices to do that work sharing. So yeah, we hear a bit that we're just a small company, we don't need Synergy. I flip it around completely and say, Synergy's cost effective for you, and you can really get some huge efficiency gains by implementing the system. We actually had a testimonial from Steve Hodgson of LD Eng. When they were going for their ISO accreditation, he really highlighted how it added flexibility into their business. I think they had staff that moved interstate and they were able to keep them on the books because they had Synergy. And it didn't really matter where they worked. At any one time, they've got a couple of people out of the office and they've got that flexibility that they never had before. So I think there's some really, there's some really big benefits there on a personal level as well. I guess this has been when we first came up with Synergy, I guess 2011 now, we didn't really understand any of these benefits, to be honest. We created the product. We knew there was a problem with 12B model projects, so we created the product. But it's only been the last 2 or 3 years that clients have given us this feedback and we've realised what the benefits actually are, which is sort of one of the reasons behind this talk. And 3 years ago at our boot camp, I was talking to Travis March at WSP, who was an early adopter of Synergy on the Toowoomba Range project, which was showcased at the last conference. And I asked him, hey Travis, how's everything going? What are the benefits of Synergy? And I'm thinking he'd say something along the lines of, rock solid version control and saving all their data. But he came back to me and said that it was actually the personal level. He could finish his work at 5:30. He could go home, have dinner with his family, tuck his kids into bed, and then start working again. So it was that family time that meant a lot to him. And that really meant a lot to us to work out that it was making our guys' lives a lot better. And I'm really proud of that fact of this product. And I think Stuart Cook sort of outlined that as well, that he had a baby during the project, but he could go home and still work. And Synergy gave him that flexibility. So yeah, definitely embrace the flexible working for business owners. Become an employer of choice. I think everyone talks about, they value people. People's number one in our business. We value flexibility. Well, here's something you can actually do to create a flexible environment for your business. You can recruit and retain top talent, and at the moment it's never been more difficult to find and keep really good staff. So it's really key for you. And realistically, in this highly technical industry, people's your competitive advantage. Okay. So just a quick plug for a bit more detail on anything I went through. We've got the 12D model management and multiple office talks in the Birds of a Feather after morning tea. So if you want to find out more information, certainly welcome to come in and ask us more questions. Thank you, everyone.